It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
All right, good morning again. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome to the show. We're not broadcasting live in Atlanta like we typically do. We are broadcasting live today from the South Carolina Fall Logistics Tech Talk in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina at the Gilliard Center. Our broadcast here is conducted in partnership with the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. And this event, which has been really interesting, we've already had, it's on the heels of a big international trade show. And it's really neat to see this Tech Talk kind of get kicked off here in the next hour or so. This event highlights some of the most innovative companies and leaders that are driving the logistics industry and growth in the state of South Carolina. Like to our listeners, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a wide variety of channels, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts from. As always, we love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. So I want to say a good morning to my co-host that's joining me once again, Greg White, a serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, trusted advisor, and board member. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Scott.
Great morning so far.
It sound important when you say it like that. I really appreciate that.
Great morning. Really enjoyed some of our earlier interviews, and I think we are in store for one of the highlights of our interview schedule that we have here in this next segment. So with that said, let's welcome in our featured guest for this segment, this episode of Supply Chain Now Radio, Garry Harper with FastFetch, an innovative and award-winning supply chain technology firm, and Mabry with Continental Tires, which, Greg, as you know, opened a new plant in Sumter, South Carolina in 2013, and here recently broke ground on what I believe is their second expansion in April of this year. So Garry and Corey, how are you doing, gentlemen?
Doing great, Scott. Thanks.
Great to have you here. I think our audience probably heard the buzz in the room as we came live on this episode.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stories and insights being shared already, and we really have. I don't think we get officially started for another few minutes here. Okay, so Garry, let's start with you, and let's talk about FastFetch. Tell us more about the company.
FastFetch is a privately owned company. It was actually founded by two retired Clemson University professors, which is somewhat of an irony for me personally, as I'm a former South Carolina Gamecock quarterback.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I've known these guys for probably 10 or 12 years now, because I spent quite a bit of time with two IT distributors in the Greenville, South Carolina area, Cenex and ScanSource. And so I got to know them as customers, and sitting from afar, watching them grow their business and watching their successes, getting to know them personally, was always very impressed with them. And so I started my career back in '81 with IBM, spent 12 years with IBM, and so I've always been in technology, so I've just been enamored by seeing some of the things that are out there. I kind of jokingly tell people I sold a $2 million IBM 3090 computer 38 years ago, and my iPhone now has more power than that thing has.
Right.
Which
and
is
much
crazy.
easier to fit in your pocket.
Oh yeah,
actually,
yeah. No air conditioning required, no water.
Right.
And so anyway, got to know these guys, and it just, from a personal standpoint, it got to a point where they had been talking to me about coming to work for them, but the risk associated with it, the fears of going with a small private company, kind of held me back. But 2.5 years ago, I decided I was going to make the move, and I'll tell you, it's the most fun I've had in 38 years. It really is. A lot of excitement. So the company was founded by Jack Peck and Ed Page, two retired Clemson University professors, but it started as a WMS company called Foxfire, still in business today in Greenville. And so Jack, as a visionary, saw it's all e-commerce coming forward. He knew that order fulfillment was probably 70-75% of the activity in a warehouse or distribution center, and just had the foresight to pull the order fulfillment piece out of Foxfire. He sold Foxfire in 05-06 timeframe and started FastFetch. And since then, again, the Stanley Black & Deckers and the Snap-on tools and by Seasons, these companies started hearing in the rumor mill out there that there was a company out there that had a order fulfillment system. It's a pick-to-light like system, but it's not pick-to-light, so to speak, because it's very innovative. And so FastFetch is all about innovation. And so much so that recently, as you guys are aware, we engaged in an awards process with CSCMP out in Anaheim with Snap-on tools. And that is a shipping cost optimization solution, which we'll talk about later. But just with the increase in shipping costs, we found a way to help customers, reduce the amount of air that they're shipping.
Sure.
So,
and shipping costs continue to rise. And we just conducted a session with a great firm out of Atlanta that helps companies manage and mitigate shipping costs. FedEx has announced their increases. UPS is right around the corner. DHL's. I mean, this is the era we live in.
Yeah. Peak season is now like 11 weeks longer than it was last year.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
surcharges are bigger.
Yeah.
Well, and also for our listeners, I'm sure you've heard us reference CSCMP on previous episodes, but if you're new to that group, it's the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. A great group based in Chicago, I believe, but with chapters everywhere, organizations. We're going to be broadcasting live at the CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable in January. A great event they've got coming up with NASTRAC. But that's one of the moving and shaking organizations that supports the end-to-end supply chain industry. So the award you mentioned, you alluded to, I understand, kind of hearing through some back channels, that there were some big names that finished second, third, and fourth, and fifth following y'all's lead.
Yeah, companies like Intel have a little larger marketing budget than FastFetch has. Last year in 2018, we were a finalist for the Innovation Award just based on our cart-based picking solution. And, that was exciting for us. I mean, out of thousands of applications and submissions, we were one of 6. And, of course, Intel won it last year, and so we had Intel on our sites. But we felt really good about the innovation of reducing shipping costs. With the increase in shipping cost and with the growth of e-commerce, it's an area that is very with high visibility.
So let's talk about what made your solution that won this innovation award from CSCMP. What made it stand out? Are there a couple things that the judges and criteria pointed to?
I really think that what stood out the most was not just FastFetch standing up there presenting a solution, doing a PowerPoint presentation, putting together a case study. I think at the conference itself, what really stood out was you've got a representative from Snap-on Tools that's standing up there talking about 30% savings in dunnage, 20% savings in the corrugated material, 5%, in shipping costs, which when all said and done, probably
adds
is more
up.
like 10 or 15%. But, they could, depending on the size of the company and the amount of shipping that you're doing, I mean, it could be over $1 million
Big impact.
a year. So, it's a significant impact. And I think what stood out was the use of artificial intelligence. The fact that the end customer was actually standing up there,
singing your praises.
Yeah, singing the praises, but basically just validating the savings that they had incurred.
Yeah, and of course, Snap-on is no small company.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, that's a big impact for a big company.
Yeah, any company. Yeah.
Interested in, you said you'd kind of separated the fulfillment aspect of the tool set from WMS and from traditional, you'd mentioned put-to-light type picking methodologies. Yep. So can you, for our listeners, can you kind of break it down a little bit? When you say fulfillment solution, at its core, how does that differ from a traditional WMS or picking type solution?
Well, I mean, just about every manufacturer, distributor, I mean, they've got some form of warehouse management system.
Right.
And so, one of the components of that obviously is order fulfillment. It's the process of receiving orders and getting those orders into the hands of pickers. Today's world, people like to talk fancy and talk about robotics, but we won't go there.
Right.
It has its place, but not necessarily the best, most efficient way within the concept of, picking orders and getting them out the door as quickly as possible.
Well, and it depends a lot on volume. When you're talking about robotics, it talks about you have to think about the intricacy of the product and the volume and pace.
And the operations, how organizations function. I mean, you talk about the Amazons of the world, and there's a place for it. Conveyor systems are out there. There's a lot of ways to pick product and pick it efficiently. But with the warehouse management system, we take the waving data out of that. In fact, basically they're orders, and then we put it into our database, and that's where the magic sauce occurs with our algorithms, which are genetic-based algorithms, that are patented by us. And so we're able to do it differently in terms of the processing of the orders that come through. Get that into the packing station so they can get the orders on the carts. We can, just depending on the if it's sheet music like a Beck of Books, it's very thin, so you can have a lot of orders. Ipsy out of Saddle Creek Logistics, 3PL. Again, they're shipping little bags with makeup in it to the club participants. And so, but then you have Snap-on Tools, for example, much larger. So anyway, we're able to take all of the dimensions, we're able to take the orders themselves in terms of the priority of those orders, and do all the processing and get those orders that picked as quickly as possible.
Sounds like a very versatile technology platform that can work with all sizes of companies and a variety of needs, and lots of growth. So on that note, I want to segue over to Continental Tire, Corey Mabry. The Continental Tire story that's being built and adding chapters since 2013 is a pretty impressive success story. Beyond the sheer plant expansion, you've also been awarded as a best place to work in the state of South Carolina. So tell us more, before we kind of talk about Continental Tire, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, so Corey Mabry, head of logistics for Continental Tire. So I've been in the industry about 27 years now. So I actually started coming out of Clemson in Greenville, South Carolina. I actually started in electronics manufacturing, so I was building printed wiring boards right from the old digital plant that evolved into Selectron, and so that's where I got my start. And then as the dot-com bubble happened in the early 2000s, and companies like Nortel and those guys went under, then I was looking for another career, and that's really where I made the shift into supply chain. So I transitioned to work for Frito-Lay under the PepsiCo umbrella. And so spent 14 years in FMCG with them, all in supply chain, and done work here in the U.S. starting out with them, but my last role was a global role, which I worked with a lot of European of our subsidiaries and divisions there. So traveled quite a bit my last 4 years and worked in a lot of different countries, got to meet a lot of great people across the supply chain. And then I found a great opportunity at Continental. So I've been with Continental about 3 years now in our Fort Mill U.S. headquarters. And so enjoying that a lot. And it's a great place to work and a great challenge. Yeah.
Seems like it. Back to Frito-Lay. I know that in the state of Georgia, there's a plant in
Perry, Georgia.
Yeah. Is that where you were based out of?
I was not in Perry, Georgia. Believe it or not, I was actually located in the heart of Coca-Cola.
Okay.
So I was in Atlanta.
Okay.
And actually built 2 distribution centers for Frito-Lay while I was there before moving on to the headquarters office. But I still resided in Atlanta while I was working for PepsiCo. Yeah.
So let's talk about Continental Tire. I remember when the news was broke, and we were doing a little bit of work in the Columbia area, and of course Sumter is 25 miles away, right, roughly, from Columbia. I was stationed at Shaw Air Force Base back in 96 and 97, a long time ago. So tell us more about what made that site stick out and why you broke ground there. What'd y'all see?
Yeah, so first of all, just to talk about the site itself. So Sumter is the first greenfield in the U.S. So we had another manufacturing facility in Mount Vernon, but this was another plant that we took over. because we do sell under the Continental and General Tire brands.
Right.
So this was our first greenfield in the U.S. And so if you look at the competition, right, you've got the Port of Charleston that gives you global access as a global company. This was important in terms of a port consideration, but really looking to the state of South Carolina, what it offers in terms of competitiveness is just a really stable business environment, pro-business attitude, right, a manufacturing-based state. So a lot of the technical college infrastructure provides that pathway to get manufacturing employees and, great logistics infrastructure as well. Really support from the state itself. And if you look at we had a chart earlier today at the International Trade Conference, you see the diversity of all the different countries that South Carolina is truly an international location for companies. Yeah,
which is really important, especially in this era of global supply chain. Right, you're working, whatever you're doing, you're working with a variety of folks, a variety of cultures, a variety of countries, a variety of geographic locales, you name it.
Well, and you're an OEM provider to BMW as well, correct? Are you still? And also to Mercedes still, or?
Yeah, so we do the Mercedes, and actually here at the South Carolina Dodge Trade Show, if you go take a look at the nice Volvo S60, it has Continental tires.
Yeah.
So it has Continental tires on it as well.
We tried to start it, but they had the battery on it.
Yeah, they had.
Well, we heard that was Suzanne Dickerson's parking spot, right?
We thought maybe that was her car.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk about the technology. We were talking pre-show about some of the technologies that are really driving demand for some of your products. And the first one that caught my attention was the noise reduction.
Yeah.
We drove in from Atlanta in the good old transit. Yeah. Yep. Which makes our life a lot easier. First early stages of our business, we were sticking everything in the Honda Accord, and that didn't go far. But you drive on a variety of roads, right? And it's so tell us more about the technology there, what's going into that, and how that's spiking demand.
Yeah, so the different ones is, so we're bringing Seal Silent, that's coming to the Sumter plant as a manufacturing capability. So, as the automotive industry is trending is really no more spare tires.
Right.
So you kind of replace that with a Seal Silent evolution in terms of that technology. Low rolling resistance, give eco tires on some of our lines that give you a better gas mileage. So those are kind of technologies that are coming and are manufactured out of our Sumter location.
Yeah. Really important. And also limiting the blowouts, right? The endurance of these new products are pretty impressive.
Well, and I think, in the past, owning a BMW, you have run flat tires by default, right? But in the past, that's been a very heavy and stiff tire.
Rod.
Yeah, and now they're so much more like
more
a regular
rod.
tire. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really meaningful because
absolutely
people will opt for those because they do ride so nice.
Well, and the proof is in demand. Clearly something's driving expansion in the Continental Tire plant in Sumter. And probably across the enterprise. Before we bring Garry back in, because we want to get both of y'all to weigh in here in a second, but before we do, Corey, speak to the impact that the Continental Tire investment in Sumter is having on the state and beyond.
Yeah, so if we talk about that, we talked when we broke ground a little bit earlier, there's about a $500 million investment, 1 million square feet under manufacturing production. We've gone through second phase, but if you just think about the economic impact of the Sumter and the local area, so that's about a little over 1,340 employees, 20 expats that work at the location, split between 28% female, 72% male. So, certainly having raw materials come in, the local connections with companies like GMP Trucking and local South Carolina businesses. In fact, we had Mr. Peck up to our Sumter plant from FastFetch, and so we've been looking at a way to see, is there a way for that technology to work in our warehouse, even though it's not e-commerce. We do have a WMS, but to see if there's any play or any way to, increase efficiency. So it's not that high pick velocity requirement. It's not that need, but there's still a need to go from, maybe a traditional RF or even the paper-based picking solutions that are out there today. So we're also looking at these types of technologies, and we got introduced as a result of the relationship we have with the South Carolina Council on Logistics Competitiveness, which is we're participants in, and I'm on the board this year for that group. So really brings a lot of the local South Carolina businesses that come to light that somehow you wouldn't see at maybe some of the bigger supply chain shows like Modex or ProMat that come around, kind of those bigger shows and the big show in Europe. So gives us an opportunity to also bring business and do business with folks that are also evolving in the state of South Carolina. Yeah. So we're always looking for those opportunities to do business within the state.
So what I loved is when you talk about the impact, of course, huge jobs, numbers, huge dollars in terms of plant investment and whatnot, but also what I heard you talk about is your involvement, right? Your involvement in local industry, and also your deliberate intent of working with companies based here, whether they're established companies or companies on the move like FastFetch is. Mm-hmm. That's really I admire companies with that in their DNA.
Yeah. The other thing I'd point out as well is we have a great partnership with the University of South Carolina. So I spoke on the panel a bit this morning about that partnership of where they have a strong supply chain program, and we work with the university as well and the university system to also take advantage of the knowledge in the academia, but also for recruiting as well.
Name of the game, right?
Finally, South Carolina was mentioned.
It's Garry Harper, former quarterback for the University of South Carolina.
Well, and he looks like he still throws some touchdown passes.
Oh, I could.
Yeah, I bet. All right. Well, so before we talk logistics, kind of a growth question for you both. Sidebar here. What we have noticed, and I think this event, the Tech Talk event, kind of illustrates a lot of this. When I first came into the industry 15 years ago, there was a lot more reluctance with the big established companies to use startups or early stage companies or younger companies. All that's changed, and we not only hear this here, we hear this almost in every episode where we have an entrepreneurial element to the conversation. And so you get a Tech Talk, this event here, where they've got a great mix. You're going to hear from large established growing companies and younger startup and non-startups, but those in the early career. And I think that really speaks to how more and more companies, and I'd love to hear y'all weigh in, are open to finding new solutions regardless if it's startup stage or not.
Yeah, I think there's more of a willingness, but it requires some validity. I mean, you have to have some customers that are installed and have had it experientially. It's a positive thing. But I'll tell you, with MHI and with CSCMP, with Supply Chain Now Radio or Radio Now, and some of these other means of getting the word out. Because when I came on board 2 years ago, I've worked for manufacturers like IBM, distributors, IT distributors like Synex and ScanSource, a rugged tablet manufacturer like Zebra. Everybody knows about them.
Sure.
For us, it's an issue of brand awareness, and we've been able over the last 2 years to get that brand out there and back it up. And so we find ourselves now, just trying to manage the growth. But it's very positive. I mean, you live in a state and work in a state like South Carolina where there's such focus and emphasis on manufacturing and on growth and just logistics in general, because supply chain covers a lot of different aspects.
It does.
Amen.
And I'm proud of the fact that that we as a state, with the Council on Competitiveness, they did a study recently looking at 15 different states, comparing ourselves against them and how we're doing. We're doing very well when you think about it. There's some areas of growth, but with most of these states, there's a red category, where they're really struggling. We're at least a green or a yellow, a positive in every one of those particular areas. And so again, getting back to from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's a matter of staying the course, believing. Like I said, this is the most fun I've had in 40 years because of the innovation, because of the ability and the experience of having installs that are successful and actually experiencing a very real ROI, return on that investment. So I see it growing a lot. I mean, there's, just as a sidebar again, there's an organization, Innovision, where they give out innovation awards. There's a company out of the University of South Carolina, Van Robotics, and they're in the educational space, helping kids to learn through robotics. So again, that's coming out of South Carolina.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
A lot of neat stuff here. And, of course, with your big blue background, interesting news with IBM launching the Sterling Supply Chain Suite blockchain product. We'll see how that goes. So, Corey, if you could weigh in on, especially in your previous global roles, how do you see these large established companies looking for new solutions regardless of the stage?
Yeah, I think to Gary's point, it's certainly opened up to the niche player and the more entrepreneurial, because at the end of the day, who thought Uber was going to take off? How disruptive was that to that industry? So now people are like, who is the next Uber? So, right, they started this movement. So I think the consideration, technology and the generational shift has changed to such a degree that you need to be looking for those innovative solutions to see who's coming with the next Uber. Otherwise, you're going to miss something. And there's a certain, as Gary alluded to, there's a certain safety if you go with the IBMs or the Intels of the world and you go with these established Zebras, et cetera, which that's a fairly safe bet. But if you're not also weighing kind of the risk reward on the other side, looking at the entrepreneurial startups or looking at the new innovation, while you may not be positioned as a larger company to immediately consider and say, oh, I'm going to go put $1 million into this thing, proof is in the pudding, to Gary's point. You have to be able to prove that from a marketing standpoint, and you need to bring somebody that's got some experience and says, yeah, we can kind of vouch for that. And then that word of mouth really travels, and then somehow it's an easier comfort level to go that path or give somebody a shot to say, okay, well, we're going to do a pilot. We're at least going to try it, because not only is it probably more cost effective, it's probably more technology oriented, and you change the role of how the inner user is now, where they're clicking the button. Well, let something else click the button, find the exception, and then you go train somebody to use a different skill set to then, okay, how do I go fix that, or how do I build a better intelligence? So, even the logistician role is really changing to more of, I'm running the transportation tendering. Well, I can kind of automate that today.
Sure.
So then how do I go educate and change their role to be more of, well, why is my rate changing like this? Okay, I need to go do something with purchasing. I need to go enact another action. So it's, managing the exceptions versus managing the day-to-day that can somehow be realized either through machine learning or artificial intelligent platforms that are coming online. And then another part that I would point to in transportation, which is fairly exciting, is you now have freight platforms that don't own a single truck, but they broker
a plethora of them,
and hundreds of millions of dollars. So then your question is, well, okay, if I plug in this platform, where does my legal come into that? How am I protected if I go put a freight platform and I plug them in? They may have the best AI and give me a rate back like this, but how do I feel confident that whoever they pick are going to meet my codes of conduct, so that I can conduct business in a very professional way and to company standards? That's exactly right. Risk management. So those new technologies popping up on the transportation platform is, okay, oh wow, freight platform's the newest thing. I got to get plugged in. Okay, there's probably a little more caution on approaching how your full transportation strategy plays out in that particular arena in logistics.
Just to piggyback, if I could,
please.
I mean, the key, Continental Tires is a user of all of these technologies and solutions that are out there. As a solution provider, the critical thing is partnering. Because one company can't do it all. There's, the IBMs and the Zebras. These are large companies, and I've worked for both of them. But they're large companies that they try to do it all. The entrepreneur has the ability to be flexible and to partner with. We've partnered with Shipware, out of California, San Diego, because we collaborate, and we are able to work in such a way where their strengths are weaknesses, and we come together and it's one. So partnering is key. The other is flexibility. I mean, just to be able to go in, find out what the real issues, pain points, problems are, and be able to adjust to meet those needs. larger companies have a difficult time doing that. They've got the solution. Here it is. Install it.
Right.
Versus let's understand not just what your problems are, but what your operations are and how you function and fit in within that. So I apologize for lingering
no, I
but
think
it's critical.
That's why we're here.
I think that's an important viewpoint. Look, in this day and age, you are either disrupting or being disrupted.
Bingo. Yes.
Right? I mean, you can't do both. We've had extensive conversations with large companies who are very good at what they do, and they have a lot of investment in what they do.
Yep.
To dilute that investment into something they want to do is difficult, and it is easier, more cost-effective, less risky, even to go with a relatively new company, an early stage or a startup. Look, I might be biased because I work with almost solely startups and early stage companies nowadays, but it's even if they take the risk and that little company goes out of business, they've still only lost $1 million, not $100 million that they've had to put into changing their infrastructure.
Yep. Right.
And those changes come from new companies. Even Sterling Commerce, which is the platform for IBM's new supply chain, that was a startup that they bought. I mean, it was a relatively early stage company. I mean, they'd gotten good size, but at some point they were a startup, and they were much, much smaller than IBM. And that, I mean, even companies like IBM are doing things like that.
Yep.
So
kind of bringing it back to the 46 counties that make up the state of South Carolina and the logistics and the business market here. Any other observations with what you're seeing in the landscape related to growth, related to innovation, related to some of what we find here that's fueling those things?
I don't think we have enough time to talk about it. I mean, seriously, when you think about rail, when you think about air, when you think about the ports, when you think about supply chain in general, there is a trend that we see going toward a move from the large distribution centers to much smaller distribution centers that are set regionally.
Yeah.
And we feel very good about our position within that. But South Carolina is suited perfectly, for the transportation logistics, for the distribution center warehousing capabilities that we have. The air, the ports. I mean, we've got the airports, we've got the ports. So it's exciting. I mean, it's amazing. I always look at the Council on Competitiveness and what our Department of Commerce is doing, and blown away with the fact that a state of this size can be so understanding and focused on such a critical area. Yeah. Because prior to getting into supply chain logistics, for me, I had no clue. You buy a product and it arrives at your door.
Well, and most consumers, even though it's shifting, because what we're seeing is more and more consumers are better understanding why you can get something in 2 days or 2 hours in some cases. And so there's beyond that and beyond all the dollars going into supply chain marketing, that folks are making more of those connections. And the impact that's having is it's impacting the talent pipeline, which is so important. We're seeing over 500 programs, universities, tech schools, you name it, that offer some sort of curriculum or degree on supply chain management, which is so important. And on that note, I do want to, I believe Continental was involved, and if they weren't, you were definitely aware, because the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness that we both are, I think we all are big fans of. We're driving it. The lemonade game that was going into schools to talk students about talk supply chain with students. That is such a powerful. Are you involved in any of those early efforts?
So not any of the early efforts, but I'm going to my first one down in Georgetown, and then we're gonna we're looking to sponsor 2 programs in Sumter as well as the Fort Mill, where we have our local school involvement. So
love that.
So that's expanding within the state through the council itself.
And that is so important, because some of what we were just talking about, you know what you know, right?
I spent 14 years on a school board in Spartanburg County, so it is critical that we get into the schools.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah. But having done this in Georgia, it's so interesting to see that the light bulb goes. You can see it in their faces, right? Yeah. So sometimes they realize that their folks, their parents, work in supply chain, or they're just connecting other dots. And in our efforts, we've always we're very practical, and it's not like we're gonna, with a student class of 25 folks, you're gonna have 25 folks go in supply chain. However, I got through my entire education through college, never having set foot in manufacturing, and I later spent 15 years. I've always been curious if someone had planted that seed upstream, especially in grade school. what other doors would that have opened as you kind of walk through those through your education career and early career decisions you make? So appreciate what the efforts that Continental Tire are doing to support those critical programs that move the needle. And so the first one you're participating in will be down in Georgetown.
Yeah, in about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, good deal.
It's a rewarding experience. You're going to love it.
Oh, it'll be a lot of fun. I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well,
every time we've done one of those, it's been a blast.
Yes.
It's you can't give these kids enough credit
Yeah.
for how rapidly,
they pick it up,
intelligent they are to pick it up so quickly. Yeah.
So we got to give a big shout out to Suzanne Dickerson for standing that program up here, and of course the company's getting behind it. And for anyone, we've spent a lot of time talking about the Council on Competitiveness. You can learn more at sccompetes.org. They're doing a lot of great work to help fuel business in the state of South Carolina. Okay, so we want to make sure our listeners can learn more about both of your respective organizations. So, Gary, how can folks learn more about FastFetch?
Well, let me just start by saying nobody can pick product faster and get it out the door and put it on a Continental Tire. www.fastfetch.biz. It's
all right.
The word fast, the word fetch, like a dog fetches a bone. Fastfetch.biz. We've got a lot of information out there in terms of brochures and videos and that kind of thing. Feel free to email me at Harper, Harper, at fastfetch.biz. And we're also, you can check out our LinkedIn page and our Facebook page. We've got a lot of information out there.
Outstanding. Great. Really appreciate. Congratulations on all the success. We look forward to having you back on and seeing what else is new in the FastFetch neighborhood.
Sounds good.
Okay, Corey, how about yourself?
Yeah, so for Continental, you can find us on Facebook. So Continental Tire Sumter plant. If you go on Facebook, you can find us on LinkedIn. See a lot of great programs just around Continental. Not only the tire division, but we're 5 divisions, the second largest automotive supplier in the world, which a lot of people don't know. No. But so it's across five total divisions. So really. You can go to Continental AG, Google that, and find us out there.
If you want to get a good look at a Continental Tire, go to a BMW dealership near you. Right?
Volvo,
there you
Volkswagen.
Go. Yep.
Yeah. Well,
there you go.
Gary, you said it right. We can't get to enough. There's so much going on. We've tried our best to tackle some of the key developments, but 2 really fascinating success stories here, kind of from different,
totally
aspects of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But look forward. Thanks again, Corey Mabry with Continental Tires, Garry Harper with FastFetch. Thanks for carving time out to sit down with us here on Supply Chain Now Radio.
Thank you, Scott.
All right.
Thank you.
So, Greg, 2 for 2 so far, huh?
It's pretty good. Yeah, these guys are pretty entertaining, I got to say. They know a little something about supply chain, as it turns out.
Oh,
also.
wow. No kidding. All right, so to our listeners, stay tuned as we continue our coverage of the 2019 South Carolina Fall Logistics Tech Talk event. And be sure to check us out at Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts from. Of course, find us at supplychainnowradio.com to find us at a variety of events, right?
Yeah.
We talked about Modex here today. We talked about the EFT Logistics CIO Forum in Austin coming up.
Got the Reverse Logistics Association coming up in Vegas.
Vegas, of all places. Yep. You can find us on the events tab at supplychainnowradio.com. For Greg White and the entire Supply Chain Now Radio gang, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful day, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.